Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings, injury updates, waiver updates, a suspension, a small trade, and some trade rumors involving the Penguins, Flyers, Oilers, Predators, and the Buffalo Sabres. And go to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Internet Hockey Channel. Now before we get into this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you all for your support. We're new to without you guys. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below and don't forget to comment down in the comment section below so I can also discuss today's video. So in today's video, we've got a couple of things to talk about. Now I would usually start off these videos by talking about some signings, but we don't have any signings from our past couple of days. No signings happened since we last did a trade rumor video. So we're going to start today's video off with looking at some injury updates. So first, Los Angeles Kings have placed Alex Turcotte on injury reserve with an upper body injury. He's going to miss at least the next week of game action, so bad blow there for the Kings. For Washington, Jacob Chychrun was activated off of injury reserve after missing a few weeks with an upper body injury, so good news there to see the Capitals get back Chychrun over the weekend, while Sonny Milano was placed in IR without injury. He should be able to be activated, at least eligible to, in the not distant future, but hopefully he's not going to be out for an overlong period of time. According to a couple of recent reports, Calle Jarnkrok is still a ways away from being back. He may have suffered a setback, so Jarnkrok still won't be making his season debut anytime soon for the Leafs, so bad blow there for Toronto. Jonah Gadgets returned over the weekend after missing 3 weeks with a back injury, so that's really good news there to see Florida get their hard-hitting fourth-line forward back. Then we saw Vancouver have Brock Boeser miss Saturday's game and is currently day-to-day with upper body injury, but should return in the not-too-distant future. While keeping with the Canucks, Dakota Joshua should miss Tuesday's game as well with a season-opening injury, so Joshua should return in the not-too-distant future, but he won't play on Tuesday, so interesting note there. For the Blackhawks, Brossoit has no timetable for his return at this point in time. He started season injury reserve, so really bad blow there for the Hawks to still have their backup goaltender out right now. St. Louis's Kasperi Kapanen returned to game action over the weekend after missing 4 games with upper body injury, and Mathieu Joseph is scheduled to return on Tuesday after missing 6 games with a lower body injury, so that should be a big boost there for the Blues to get a couple of middle six forwards back. Vegas has Mark Stone out right now, the day-to-day with a lower body injury. According to some recent updates, he's expected to not be out long-term, so this is expected to be a short-term thing, so good news there for Vegas. For Seattle, Vince Dunn is out 3 more weeks at least with a mid-body injury, so that's a bad blow there for the Kraken. As Dunn, who's still on long-term injury reserve, is going to miss at least the next 3 weeks, so bad blow there for Seattle. For the Penguins, Kevin Hayes is out week to week with an upper body injury, while Cody Glass, already on IR, has been diagnosed with a concussion, so some bad blows there. Some bottom 6 forwards are going to be out for the next little while for the Penguins. Colorado's Val Nichushkin is scheduled to return to game action after being suspended over the past couple of months on Friday, so that's a big boost there for the Avalanche, getting Nichushkin back in the lineup, especially with them hurting so bad right now. San Jose's Jake Wallman missed his 4th game last night with an upper body injury, so bad blow there for the Sharks as one of their top end defensemen are out right now. Max Pacioretty is placed on injury reserve with a lower body injury. He's going to miss at least the next week, so bad blow there for the Leafs. While Austin Matthews is scheduled to miss Tuesday's game with his injury and should be hopefully returning in the not distant future, but he's at least going to miss Tuesday's game. Calgary's Anthony Mantha is out for the season with a ACL surgery, so it's a bad blow there for the Calgary. Not only was Mantha fitting Quite well with the Calgary, but there's also a potential trade chip for them at the trade deadline, so that's a bad blow there for Calgary. Alex Romanov is still out with upper body injury for the New York Islanders, but is on their current road trip and did start practicing in a non-contact jersey, so starting to work his way back up, but still out for Romanov. Philadelphia placed Drysdale on injury reserve with upper body injury. He's going to miss at least the next week, so bad blows there for the Flyers. While Ryan Poehling was activated off of injury reserve after missing a few games with a groin injury, so big blow there for the Philadelphia Flyers that Drysdale's going to be out, but good to see Poehling get back. Buffalo lost Ukko Pekka Luukkonen, Tage Thompson, and Mattias Samuelsson all in last night's game. Thompson left last game with upper body injury, as did Samuelsson. UPL left the game with ailments, so bad blows there for the Sabres. Hopefully those 3 are all not going to be out for too long of a period of time. And Ottawa's Shane Pinto may return as early as Tuesday from his injury, so that could be a really big boost there for Senators to get Pinto back. But those are the injury updates from our past couple of days. So bad news to see guys like Drysdale be out, Thompson potentially be out, Mantha out for the year, Pacioretty be out, Wallman, Hayes. Bad to see all those guys be out, but good to see guys like Poehling be back, Joseph potentially, Pinto potentially, Chychrun be back. Good to see all those those guys get back, and hopefully those guys are going to be well integrated and not too rusty when they come back. So interesting note there. Going over to a small trade we saw from over the last week. I didn't get around to this in our last video, but the Philadelphia Flyers and Edmonton Oilers made a small trade. The trade is as follows. The Philadelphia Flyers acquired Ben Gleason from the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for Ronnie Attard. Now this is a small move that's not too bad for either side. Attard is currently making $850,000, Gleason $775,000. Both are in the final year of a 2-year deal. Attard's 25 years old, Gleason's 26 years old, so both are pretty young players. Gleason's more of an AHLer. Attard seems to have more of a future as like a third liner. Attard this year started the season in the AHL for Philadelphia. Gleason started the season in the AHL for Edmonton, so I expect them both to remain in the AHL, but I think Attard has a little bit more of a future potentially as like a third pair of defensemen on the Oilers blue line than Gleason does in Philadelphia, so it's a decent young player AHL guy swap right now. I think the Oilers do win by getting Attard because I do think he has a little more upside than Gleason does, but these two are very similar players, even though Gleason I think has a little more upside, and I think this could be a deal that works out maybe for both sides, but I think for the time being both these guys are going to be AHL defensemen, and I think eventually there's a potentiality for Attard to be a solid 6th, 7th defenseman for the Oilers organization. So smart move there for the Oilers, but an interesting move for both sides nonetheless, although I do think the Oilers do win this deal, so interesting note there. We saw a suspension happen over the weekend, as after the Thursday night game between the Canucks and the Kings, Tanner Jeannot took a really bad hit against Canucks forward Brock Boeser that wound up serving him a match penalty. He was out of the game, and the day after the Kings found out that Tanner Jeannot was awarded a 3-game suspension. So he was going to be suspended for the next 3 games after that game against the Canucks. I think that he's already served 2 games up to this point as they're recording this video. So he's only got 1 more game to go. That was a really bad hit from Jeannot, and I think 3 games is deserved given how bad the hit that was. So interesting note there, but Jeannot did deserve, I think, the 3-game suspension. So interesting note there. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. Now we have 5 things to talk about here, and a couple of them are really important. So we'll get to those important ones later towards the end of the video. I want to start with a couple of interesting pieces of news. First from the Buffalo Sabres. There were a couple of recent reports. I think Darren Dreger mentioned one of this. I think there were a couple of other reports that said this too, that the Buffalo Sabres, I talked about how Kevin Adams has been a very active GM. He wants to really improve this team. He wants to try and get this team back to the playoffs. They yesterday had their 3-game winning streak snapped. They're 1 game below 500 now. They're not doing overly bad, especially with how bad teams like Tampa, Boston, and Ottawa are doing in the Atlantic right now. So the not overly great start has not been overly hurtful for the Buffalo Sabres, but they need to start getting going if they want to make the playoffs this year. And we've heard that Kevin Adams was working the phones trying to improve this team. Well, apparently a couple of teams have been trying to check in on trying to acquire some of Buffalo's players, and those 2 players teams are trying to acquire from Buffalo are Dylan Cozens and Byram. And according to a couple of recent reports from Darren Dreger and I think a couple of other sources, Buffalo's not budged on them. They're not willing to trade either one of those 2. Byram has worked out so far, at least at this point in time, to be a fantastic top 4 defenseman for the Buffalo Sabres. I think he has something like he's nearing it or has double-digit points already, and the Sabres only in like game 16. So he's had a very fantastic start to the year. He's been one of the better Buffalo Sabres defensemen. I think only Dahlin's been a little bit better than he has. So Byram's had a fantastic start to the year. I don't know why they would want to move him. Cozens, well, he hasn't had the best of starts to the season. Is still the team's second-line center. Is still signed on a long-term deal, and is still viewed as like the solid second-line center for this team going forward. So I know why some teams might want to try and check in on them, because Buffalo, like we said, hasn't had the greatest of starts. But given how good Byram's been and how high they view Cozens, I don't think there was any sort of possibility that those 2 would get moved by Buffalo. So I'm not overly surprised that the Sabres stuck to their guns and did not move either one of those 2. So we'll have to wait and see what happens next. But Byram has worked out fantastically for Buffalo, and Cozens is the solid team's second-line center. So I would not be overly surprised if, even though some teams wanted to check in on them, I'm not surprised the Buffalo Sabres said no, so I'll have to wait and see what happens there, but I expect both those guys to remain in Buffalo. Next, going over to the Edmonton Oilers. According to a recent Edmonton Oiler reporter, I'm not exactly sure who said this, but they said that the Oilers may switch their focus on the defenseman. Now, we've heard for the longest time the Oilers need a top 4 shutdown, right shot defenseman who can maybe play with a guy like Darnell Nurse, who could be a really solid top 4 right shot defenseman, sort of replace what they had in Tyson Barrie, Philip Broberg, Cody Ceci, that sort of shutdown guy. But I think it was Bob Stauffer, if I'm correct, I might be wrong on that, said that the Oilers may sort of switch their target to a more puck-moving offensive defenseman who still can play on the right side. So they might be looking for a more offensive-minded guy instead of a more defensive-minded defenseman. Still seems like they are looking for a right shot defenseman, but instead of going for a guy who's maybe more of like a David Savard type guy, who's more of a defensive guy, they're going to be trying to go after a guy like Rasmus Anderson, who's more of an offensive guy. So not exactly sure who's linked to Edmonton at this point in time. There were a couple of guys in the offseason who were linked to Edmonton, but at this point in time, not exactly sure who's linked to Edmonton. But it does seem like they are still in the market for a right shot defenseman. It just seems that their focus might be shifting from a defensive-minded defenseman to a more offensive-minded one. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But I expect the Oilers to still continue their pursuit of a defenseman, a right shot defenseman, and maybe someone who's more offensive-minded. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Going over to the Philadelphia Flyers. When it comes to them, we have a couple of things talking about that. First, Anthony D'Amico was talking about Rasmus Ristolainen because he's been a name who's been coming up for Philadelphia Flyers over the past while as a potential trade candidate for the Flyers. And he says that the Flyers are potentially listening on Rasmus Ristolainen, who's got, I think, this year plus next year left at a $5.4 million cap hit, but the asking price is extremely high. He says that the Flyers value Ristolainen at a first-round pick or something of equivalent value. So they would really like a first-round pick or something of equivalent value for Ristolainen in a trade. So I'm not exactly sure if I would do that, pull a trigger on that sort of deal. I think Ristolainen's more of like a second-round pick and maybe a mid-level prospect. I don't think he's worth something of first-round caliber talent at this point in time, but he's still solid top 4, top 6 right shot defenseman. He's a bigger body. He can play really well. He's actually worked out quite well in Philadelphia after being acquired from Buffalo 3 or 4 years ago. So this could be a really good pickup there for some teams who have playoff aspirations. But I'm not sure if teams would pony up an asking price of like a first round pick or something first round pick level quality for Ristolainen. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And then David Pagnotta mentioned 2 players who are also in their trade rumor mill for the Philadelphia Flyers. So it could be dealt not just in future, because the Flyers haven't had a great start. I think they're like 6-8-2, one of the lowest teams in the Metro, one of the lowest teams in the East. So there's a really good chance they're going to be sellers at this year's trade deadline. And 2 names that Pagnotta mentioned as potential trade candidates would be Scott Laughton and Nick Deslauriers. Both are solid bottom 6 forwards, not on overly bad deals. Deslauriers, I think, got 2 more years left at $1.75 million. Laughton, I think, has 1 or 2 years left at $3 million. So both are on shorter term deals. They're not making overly egregious amount of money. And I think both could fit in really well. Laughton's a versatile middle 6 forward. Deslauriers is a hard-hitting 4th liner. So I think there could be some teams out there, especially with the fact that these guys mostly play playoff style hockey, that there would be a lot of teams out there who would have some major interest in guys like Deslauriers and Laughton. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But according to a couple of recent reports from Pagnotta, he says that Deslauriers and Laughton are 2 names we're going to have to watch out for when it comes to the Flyers. So we'll have to check in on that. Next, going over to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, when I was originally researching some of this stuff, I still came across some articles saying that Marcus Pettersson could be a potential trade candidate for the Pittsburgh Penguins and Rakell, and that was sort of what I was going to focus on. Rakell has, I think, 2 or 3 years left at $5.5 million cap hit. Pettersson's a penny UFA. Pettersson's a really good top 4 right shot defenseman. Rakell can fit in any team's middle 6 and be a really good goal scorer. So I thought there could be some teams out there who might really want to try and acquire those 2 guys. But then earlier today, we saw Kyle Dubas come out and say that after a 7-1 loss to the Dallas Stars that sent Pittsburgh to having the 2nd lowest points percentage in the East entering Tuesday's game action and being lower than their Pennsylvania rivals in Philadelphia, he says that anyone except for Sidney Crosby is on the table and potentially open for trade. And then later we saw Lars Eller be dealt by Pittsburgh Penguins to Washington Capitals. So it seems that there's a very good chance we could see more movement from Pittsburgh. Now, on top of Rakell, on top of Pettersson, who's been mentioned, I wonder about Matt Grzelcyk, who has been a decent player, signed a 1-year deal in the offseason. He could be a potential 3rd pair option for a lot of teams out there. Brian Russ has been named. I've been potentially thinking about over the last little while. He could be a potential option for a lot of teams who are looking for some top 6 help. I do wonder about some other guys that this Penguins team has, especially guys in the final year of their deals. What about their goaltenders? Could they move a guy like Nedeljkovic, Jerry, Blomqvist? There's a lot of options here for Penguins. And for Kyle Dubas to come out and say that anyone except for Crosby is on the table is quite surprising. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. It seems like there could be the beginnings of a fire sale in Pittsburgh, and we're going to have to wait and see on if this does indeed happen. But I look at guys who are on expiring deals on top of guys like maybe Rust and Rakell, who could potentially be moved by Pittsburgh Penguins. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to the Nashville Predators, last Thursday, I think it was, following the 3-2 defeat at the hands of the Washington Capitals, Barry Trotz came out, and I think it was on a radio hit, and said that the Predators, if they don't turn things around, not just in the future, that he would start their rebuild plan. So that's like a 180-degree turn from what happened in the offseason. Like in the offseason, they spent money, they went after Stamkos, Marchessault, Shea, Wedgwood. Like they went all out in the offseason to try and make this team better, and it has not worked out earlier on in the season. They're 5-9-1. I think they're one of the lowest teams, if not the lowest team in the Western Conference. They've been surpassed by San Jose. Like they're not doing overly well right now. They need something to change, and according to Barry Trotz, if something doesn't change soon, he'd be open to moving off pieces. So players we could see be moved by the Nashville Predators could be a guy like Alex Carey. I think he's got 2 years left on his deal. Could be a guy like Luke Schenn, who I don't think has too much term left on his deal. There's probably a couple of other defensemen. I would wonder about Gustav Nyquist, who's entering the final year of his deal. Could a couple of other veteran type forwards be moved? Could they move a couple of younger guys like a Tomasino or a Parsonen? I definitely do wonder who they would potentially try and move. I don't think they would move Forsberg or Yosti or Saros. I don't see moving any of those guys, but I do think there's a possibility that we could see some major movement this season from the Nashville Predators if they don't turn things around in the not distant future. So we're going to have to wait and see on what happens with the Predators, but it does seem like after an extremely slow start, Trotz is starting to grow impatient and may start the rebuild plan in the not distant future. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. That's all I'm going to talk for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. What do you think will happen? Do the Preds enact the rebuild plan? If so, what sort of Predators could get moved? Do the Penguins start a fire sale? And if so, what sort of Penguins could be moved? Does Deslauriers get moved? Laughton, Ristolainen from Philadelphia? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. Plus, what do you think about Edmonton potentially changing their options from a defensive-minded defenseman to an offensive-minded defenseman? And what do you think about teams trying to acquire Byram and Cozens from Buffalo? Definitely love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Plus, the suspension, trades, and injury updates from the past couple of days. Love to hear your guys' thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. So, that's all for today. Remember to like this video. If you're already to subscribe down below. Thank you all for your support. We're now with you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't leave a comment down in the comment section below so you can also see this video. Also a blog to about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. I'll link down in the description below. And kind of see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.